Hey you guys, welcome to Lab 8.1, and this is the reading I want you to do before you do the lab. So it's a handout on typographic terms, and I'm going to go through a few of the terms. I want you to go through in more detail, but I'm going to highlight three that you need to know in order to do the lab. So on the first page, down here we have the counter, and I'm highlighting three things. I'm highlighting counters, X height, and terminals, because those three things really affect legibility with your typefaces. So the first one, counters, is this negative space inside your type letters. And depending on how fat the stroke is, you're going to have the space inside will vary. So in order for good legibility, you want to have good sized counter spaces. If you look when you're looking at typefaces, if you look at the letter O, you're going to see there's a lot of variation in terms of how much counter space there is in the letter O. And usually that's a pretty good sign with being able to gauge the effectiveness of your typeface. So there is no good typeface or bad typeface. There's just appropriate typefaces. And an appropriate typeface for the layout that you're going to do next week is part of that is going to be able to use a kind of a good typeface with adequate counter space so that there's good legibility. So kind of start looking closely at your type and paying attention to that negative space inside your letters. As you can see, like all these letters that have enclosed spaces, those are all counter spaces. And even the letter N here, it's not closed, but it has an open counter, all right? But we really just refer to the closed spaces as counter spaces. This is the second page, and I want you to read that. And then moving on to the third page, we have terminals. And terminals are essentially for what we described, letters that don't have serifs. The actual end of the stroke is called a terminal. And when you start looking at typefaces, you're going to see all different kinds of terminals. So I want you to start paying attention to that. So that's the second thing. And then this page refers to serifs and brackets. And you'll see that serifs really kind of give a typeface a particular kind of look and feel and functionality. So start kind of paying attention to what kind of construction those terminals or those serifs have. And brackets are essentially where the serif gets connected to the stroke. So some typefaces, like this big slab serif typeface, you'll see that there is no bracket. It's just the serif meets the stroke. Whereas with this typeface over here on the right, you'll see that the serif is kind of joined, and that joining area refers to the brackets. And those brackets end up kind of giving typefaces particular looks and feels. So those are good to kind of become familiar with. The last term that you're going to need for your lab is the X height. And that's essentially the height from the baseline, which is where all type sits on this invisible baseline, to the top of the lowercase letters. And in these examples here, you can see that this X height is quite small in relation to the overall height of the letters. And the second example is kind of medium. And you can see that the X height here is a little bit larger in relation to the overall height of the letter. And the third example, you can see the X height is quite large in that it's bigger in relation to the overall height. So hopefully you can see that X height, the small, medium, and large. And you on your lab exercise, you're going to have to give me examples like I have featured here on this page. On the left, you've got three different examples of terminals, and this is kind of what I want you to do. I want you to go through your typefaces and look for different styles of terminals and then identify which typeface it is. So you can see here on Minion, this one is a little graduated. On Helvetica New, it's just kind of abruptly ends, and it's the same width as the stroke width. And on E.B. Garamond, it kind of becomes bulby, so it has, each of the terminals kind of present a different look and feel and functionality. The second thing you're going to do is identify different typefaces with varying X heights, and make sure to include which typefaces they are, so that you can share with other students and we can become more familiar with different typefaces. And then the counters, I just want you to look for their various styles. And when you start looking at type, it's really important to look at the negative space. And in the counter instance, that negative space is inside. So you're really looking at the white space. And in that first example in Bordeaux Roman, you've got kind of an elongated counter space and it's quite narrow. And so that would probably be a pretty hard type to read, especially if it was a small size. Your modern number 20 has a little bit more counter space in relation to the space or the size of the letter. So that might work as a functional typeface, but it has these really thin serifs and really thin lines. And so that might work better for a print design than a screen design, because sometimes those thin lines break up on the screen. The last choice, Helvetica Neue, as you can see, the strokes are pretty consistent. There's not too much variation. In this modern typeface up above here, you've got a lot of contrast between the strokes. It's really thin and really fat, whereas with Helvetica Neue, it's all pretty much consistent. And you'll see here that they have Helvetica Neue also has the largest counter space, which makes it particularly a good typeface for screen reading and our mobile devices. So that's kind of in a nutshell some of the terms that I want you to work with, and that's it.